Picture this. A man stands in the most magnificent throne room in the ancient world, Pharaoh's palace. The walls are covered in gold that catches the Egyptian sun and throws light across polished marble. Floors. There smells like incense and power. And this man. He's wearing royal robes. A gold chain rests heavy around his neck. Pharaoh's signet ring, the ring that commands armies, moves nations, controls the grain that'll keep millions alive, sits on his finger. He's 30 years old. And he's the second most powerful person in Egypt, right now. 10 men are walking toward him. They're dusty and desperate. Coming from Canaan to beg for food because the famine back home is killing them. When they reach him, they drop to their faces, foreheads pressed against the cold floor. They're bowing to him. He knows exactly who they are. They have no idea who he is, because these 10 men, they're his brothers, the same brothers who ripped off his clothes, threw him into an empty well, and sold him to slave traders for 20 pieces of silver. The same brothers who went home and told their father that wild animals had torn him apart. He can see the fear in their eyes as they stay low, waiting for this Egyptian lord to speak. If they only knew, if they could see past Egyptian makeup, past the royal robes, past 13 years of impossible transformation. But let's rewind. Because 13 years earlier this same man, this prince of Egypt, was naked, bloody, and screaming at the bottom of a pit while these very brothers sat nearby eating lunch, debating whether to kill him or just let him die slowly in the heat. How does that happen? How does a Hebrew slave boy end up running an empire? How do you go from the pit to the palace? The answer is going to wreck you. Because this isn't a story about luck. It's not about being in the right place at the right time. This is a story about betrayal so cruel it'll make you sick, suffering so deep you'll wonder how anyone survives it, and a plan so unbelievable that even the man himself couldn't see it while it was happening. It starts with a dream. Actually, it starts with a coat. And that's where we're going next. To understand the impossible rise, we first have to understand the betrayal that started it all. If you think you know this story, I promise you've never heard it like this. Make sure you're subscribed and have the notifications turned on, because you are not going to want to miss a single part of this series. Let's get into it. Have you ever had that one sibling who was just the favorite? The golden child? Well, meet Joseph. His father, Jacob, had 12 sons. 12. But if you asked anyone which one was the favorite, they'd all say Joseph without even thinking. And his dad, Jacob, didn't even try to hide it. You see, Joseph was the son of Jacob's old age, born to his beloved wife, Rachel. The other 11 brothers, they were sons of Leah and the servant wives, women Jacob was either tricked into marrying or felt obligated to have children with. So, yeah, this family was a bit of a soap opera from the start. But Jacob decided to turn the drama up to 11. He gave Joseph a coat. Now, I know what you're thinking, it's just a coat. No doubt this was the coat. A richly ornamented, long-sleeved robe. The kind of thing that screams, this kid doesn't have to lift a finger. It was a symbol. It basically said, this is the son who gets everything. Imagine his brothers. They're out in the scorching sun, tending sheep, covered in dirt, their hands dry and blistered. And then there's Joseph, chilling at home in his fancy, colorful coat. You can probably guess how they felt. The Bible is blunt about it. They hated him so much they couldn't even speak to him nicely. That coat was a constant, shimmering reminder that their father's love for them was just a fraction of his love for Joseph. Then, things got even worse. Joseph had a dream. He was only 17, still a teenager, maybe a little naive. He thought, hey, my brothers will love to hear about this cool dream I had. So, one morning, he tells them, listen to this. We were all out in the field, bundling up grain, and suddenly my bundle stood up straight, and all of your bundles gathered around and bowed down to mine. You could have heard a pin drop. Then, one of his brothers probably let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Oh, really? So you think you're going to rule over us? Be our king? Any normal person would have stopped right there. Read the room, Joseph. But he didn't. He had another dream. And, you guessed it, he told them about that one too. This time, he said, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were all bowing down to me. This was too much. Even his own father, Jacob, who adored him, called him out. What is this dream? Are you saying your mother, your brothers, and I are all going to come and bow to the ground before you? But here's the thing about Joseph. I don't think he was trying to be arrogant. He was just a kid with these incredibly vivid dreams. And he didn't grasp the politics of his own family. He didn't realize he was pouring gasoline on a fire that was already raging. His brothers, though, they understood perfectly. They heard him talking about thrones and bowing in power. And all they could see was that beautiful, infuriating coat. It represented everything they could never have: their father's unconditional love. The Bible says they hated him even more because of his dreams, but it wasn't just hate anymore. It was something darker, twisting into rage, the kind of rage that makes people do terrible things. And Joseph? He was completely oblivious. He probably just thought his brothers were a little jealous, a bit moody. He had no idea that his dreams and that dazzling coat had painted a giant target on his back. He couldn't see that his dreams were about to become a living nightmare. And that's where our story takes a very dark turn. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe for the next part of this incredible story. Can you imagine the hatred? The kind of hatred that crackles in the air, so thick you could feel it. This was the world of Joseph and his 10 older brothers. One day, their father, Jacob, made a fateful decision. He sent his favorite son, 17-year-old Joseph, to check on his brothers, who were 50 miles away with the flocks. 50 miles, alone. As Joseph walked, his special coat, a gift from his father, flashed in the sun, a constant, colorful reminder to his brothers of just how much more he was loved. They saw him coming from a long way off. Here comes that dreamer, one of them sneered. And in that moment, years of simmering jealousy boiled over into a full-blown rage. Far from their father's watchful eyes, the darkest thoughts took over. Let's kill him, someone said. We'll throw him in a pit and say a wild animal got him. Then we'll see what happens to his precious dreams. Reuben, the oldest, tried to stop them. Not out of love, but because he knew murder was a line they could never uncross. Let's not kill him, he argued. Just throw him into this empty well. His secret plan was to come back later and rescue Joseph, hoping to be the hero. But he would never get the chance. When Joseph arrived, probably with a smile on his face, they grabbed him. 10 grown men against one teenager. They ripped that beautiful coat from his back and threw him into a deep, dry cistern. Imagine the terror. One moment, you're in the bright sun, the next, you're in darkness, hitting the hard bottom, looking up at the faces of your own brothers staring down at you. Joseph screamed. He begged for his life. Years later, his brothers would confess. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. And what did they do while their little brother was trapped in a dark hole, crying for them? They sat down and ate lunch. Just then, they spotted a caravan of traders heading to Egypt. Judah, another brother, had a new idea. What do we gain if we kill him? Let's sell him instead. So they pulled Joseph out of the pit. He probably thought they were letting him go, but he was wrong. For 20 pieces of silver, the price of a slave, they sold their own brother. Joseph was dragged away in chains, his world collapsing as his brothers simply watched him go, counting their silver. When Reuben returned to the empty cistern, he was devastated. The boy is gone. What will I do? But the others were already moving on. They took Joseph's coat, dipped it in goat's blood, and took it back to their father. We found this, they said. Is it your son's? Jacob recognized it instantly and collapsed in grief. A wild animal has torn him to pieces. He tore his clothes and mourned with a sorrow so deep, no one could comfort him. For the next 22 years, he believed his favorite son was dead. And his other sons, the ones who caused all this pain, just stood by and let their father suffer. Meanwhile, Joseph, the dreamer, was in chains, on his way to Egypt. His life had just turned into a nightmare. Thanks for watching. If you want to hear what happens next in this incredible story, make sure to subscribe. Imagine being 17, ripped from your home, and thrown into a world you don't recognize. This is Joseph's reality in Egypt. The buildings scrape the sky, covered in a language he can't decipher. The air smells strange, the sounds are a chaotic jumble. And the gods have the heads of animals. He is utterly alone. A world away from everything he's ever known. At the slave auction, he's sold like property to a man named Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's personal guard. This is a powerful man, someone who collects people like you or I might collect stamps. Joseph is just a number, a face in the crowd of slaves, shackled in a foreign land. This should be rock bottom. This should be where his story ends in a whisper. But the text tells us something baffling. The Lord was with Joseph. Not the Lord felt sorry for him. Not the Lord would eventually rescue him. It says the Lord was with him, right there, in the middle of his servitude. And because of that presence, a strange thing started to happen. Everything Joseph touched prospered. He wasn't meant to be anything more than an invisible, replaceable servant. But Potiphar couldn't help but notice. The tasks Joseph performed were done with an excellence that was almost supernatural. When Joseph was put in charge of a project, it thrived. The entire household began to run more smoothly, more efficiently. It was as if Joseph possessed a golden touch, an innate ability to bring order and success out of chaos. Seeing this, Potiphar did something unusual. He promoted Joseph. He kept promoting him until this young Hebrew slave was in charge of his entire estate. Potiphar trusted him so completely that the only thing he worried about was what was on his own dinner plate. From a chained slave to the CEO of a high-ranking official's household, it's an unbelievable comeback. For the first time since his brothers threw him in that pit, Joseph could finally take a breath. He must have thought, maybe this is it. Maybe the dream God gave me isn't dead after all. But then, someone else noticed Joseph, Potiphar's wife. The Bible makes a point to say that Joseph was well-built and handsome. But it was more than just his appearance. It was his competence, his integrity, the quiet dignity he carried despite his circumstances. He was there, in her house, every single day, managing everything while her powerful husband was often away on official business. One day, she decided to make her move. She looked at him and said, "Come to bed with me." It was direct, blunt, and shocking. Joseph immediately refused. He told her, "My master trusts me with everything in this house. He has held back nothing from me except you. Because you are his wife, how could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Pay close attention to his reasoning. He didn't just mention betraying Potiphar's trust, which would have been reason enough. His primary concern was sinning against God. Even here, surrounded by a pagan culture, far from the influence of his family, Joseph's loyalty remained fixed. His identity was not defined by his status as a slave, but by his relationship with his Creator. But she was persistent. Day after day, she propositioned him, pressured him, tried to seduce him. And day after day, Joseph held his ground, saying no. You can feel the tension ratcheting up, can't you? We all know how this scenario can play out: a powerful, scorned woman and a powerless slave with no one to vouch for him. The situation is a powder keg, and the fuse is getting shorter. Something is about to give, and it's going to be explosive. Joseph's integrity is about to be tested in the most brutal way imaginable, proving that sometimes doing the right thing can lead you straight into an even deeper crisis. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe for the next part of Joseph's incredible journey. Imagine this: you're at the absolute rock bottom of your life. Then, things start to look up. You work hard, you earn trust, you start rebuilding. And just when you think you've finally found solid ground, the floor gives way and you fall even further. That's exactly where we find Joseph in our story today. Joseph was running everything in the house of Potiphar, an important Egyptian official. He had trust, authority, and a glimmer of hope, but Potiphar's wife had other plans. One day, when no one else was home, she saw her chance. She grabbed Joseph by his cloak and demanded he sleep with her. In that split second, Joseph faced a choice: give in and keep his comfortable position, or honor God and run. He chose integrity. He twisted out of his cloak, leaving it in her hand, and fled the house. Humiliated and furious, Potiphar's wife flipped the script. She started screaming, holding up Joseph's cloak as false evidence. When the other servants rushed in, she cried, "Look! This Hebrew slave tried to assault me, but when I screamed, he ran away, leaving his cloak behind." She put on the performance of a lifetime, saving the cloak and her crocodile tears for her husband. When Potiphar came home, she spun the same vicious lie. "That slave you brought into our home tried to violate me." Potiphar was enraged. Whether he believed her or not, his reputation was at stake. He had to act. So, Joseph, the man who did everything right, was thrown into the king's prison. The kind of place you don't come back from. Everything he had worked for was gone in an instant. All because he chose to do the right thing. Can you imagine the questions he must have had for God? I obeyed you. I resisted temptation. And this is my reward. Chains and a dark cell. It seems like a cruel joke. He went from a pit to slavery, and now to prison. Each time he did the right thing, his situation got worse. But here's the most powerful line in this whole story: the Lord was with Joseph. Even there. Even in the darkness, in the despair, in the place where hope goes to die, God had not abandoned him. This is a critical lesson for us. Sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't lead to an immediate reward. In fact, it can cost you dearly. It can feel like you're being punished for your faithfulness. In prison, Joseph didn't become bitter or give up. He continued to be who he was. He worked hard. He showed kindness. And just like before, people noticed. The prison warden saw Joseph's character and put him in charge of all the other prisoners. It's a strange kind of promotion, right? Being the head prisoner doesn't change the fact that you're still in prison. The walls are still there. The future still looks bleak. This is the crushing reality of waiting on God's timing. Joseph was still locked up, forgotten by the world, holding onto dreams that seemed to fade with each passing day. How do you keep faith when your faithfulness seems to lead you deeper into the pit? How do you trust God's plan when it feels like you're being buried alive? Joseph was learning a profound truth that we all need to grasp: God's delays are not God's denials. What looked like a dead end was actually a detour, positioning him for a future he couldn't yet imagine. He couldn't see it then, surrounded by stone and sorrow. All he could do was trust, one day at a time, that even in the deepest darkness, God was still with him. And that made all the difference. What do you do when your faith costs you? Let's talk about it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more. We'll see you next time. 2 years. Just let that sink in for a moment. 2 full years passed while Joseph sat in that prison. He was doing the right thing, managing the place, helping other people, and getting absolutely nothing in return. 730 days of waking up and wondering if God had completely forgotten him. Then one day, 2 new prisoners arrived. These weren't just any common criminals. They were Pharaoh's own cupbearer and his baker, high-ranking officials who had somehow gotten on the wrong side of the most powerful man in Egypt. And they were placed directly under Joseph's care. One night, both of them had dreams. When Joseph came to check on them in the morning, he could see it all over their faces. They were troubled, distressed, like they'd seen something that shook them to their very core. Joseph, with his characteristic compassion, asked, "Why do you look so sad today?" They answered, "We both had dreams, but there's no one here to interpret them." Now, listen to what Joseph says next. This is a man whose own dreams were stolen from him, a man who was betrayed, sold into slavery, and thrown into prison, all because of dreams. But he looks at them and says, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Even after everything he'd been through, Joseph's faith wasn't shaken. He still believed God spoke through dreams. He still believed God had a purpose. So, the cupbearer went first. He said, "In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. So I took the grapes, squeezed them into the cup, and placed it in Pharaoh's hand. Joseph listened, and somehow, the meaning was clear to him. This is the interpretation. He said, the 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your position. You'll be putting the cup in his hand, just like you used to do. And then, Joseph says something that just breaks your heart. He pleads, but when all goes well with you, please, remember me. Show me kindness, mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. I was stolen from my home, and even here, I've done nothing to deserve being put in this dungeon. You can just hear the desperation, the flicker of hope in his voice. Remember me, please, the baker. Seeing the good news the cupbearer received, eagerly shared his dream. I also had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them. Joseph's expression must have changed. He knew the meaning of this one, too, and it wasn't good. Quietly, he said, this is what it means. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang your body on a pole, and the birds will eat your flesh. 3 days later, it was Pharaoh's birthday. He threw a massive feast for all his officials. And just as Joseph had predicted, he lifted up the heads of both the cupbearer and the baker. The cupbearer was restored to his position, standing right beside Pharaoh, pouring his wine. The baker was executed. Everything happened exactly as Joseph had foretold, down to the last detail. The cupbearer was free. He was back in the palace, with direct access to the most powerful man in the world. And Joseph waited. He waited for the cupbearer to keep his promise, to mention his name, to get him out. But the cupbearer forgot. The Bible puts it so bluntly. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. 2 more years, Joseph sat in that prison for 2 more years. Imagine the crushing disappointment. Hope raised, only to be dashed again. Waiting for a rescue that never seemed to come. Sometimes, God's timing just doesn't make any sense to us. Sometimes, being faithful feels like it's leading absolutely nowhere. You can do everything right and still end up feeling forgotten in a dungeon. But Joseph kept showing up. He kept being faithful. He kept trusting. Even when it seemed foolish, he didn't know it yet. But the cupbearer's forgetfulness wasn't a mistake. It was a crucial part of the plan. Because when Pharaoh himself would eventually need a dream interpreted when the timing was perfect and the stakes were higher than ever, there would be only one man in all of Egypt who could help. And that man was still sitting in a prison cell, waiting for a God who hadn't forgotten him at all. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Pharaoh woke up in a cold sweat. He was the most powerful man in the ancient world, ruler of Egypt, a living God to his people. But right then, in the darkness, he was just a man haunted by a dream he couldn't understand. He'd been standing by the Nile when 7 fat, healthy cows came out of the water. Beautiful animals. Then, 7 other cows appeared, ugly and gaunt, so starved their ribs showed through their skin. And the gaunt cows ate the fat cows, swallowed them whole. But afterward, they looked just as starved as before. Pharaoh's heart pounded. He told himself it was just a dream and fell back asleep. But then he dreamed again. This time, he saw a single stalk of grain with 7 full, ripe heads. Then 7 more heads sprouted, thin and scorched by the wind, and the thin heads swallowed the good heads. Pharaoh woke up. And this time, he knew this wasn't a normal dream. This was urgent. It felt like the universe was trying to send him a message. The next morning, deeply troubled, he summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. These were the best minds of the most advanced civilization on earth. Men who studied the stars and interpreted omens. He told them his dreams. They stood in silence. Not one of them could explain what it meant. All their wisdom was useless. That's when the cupbearer, the man who served Pharaoh wine every day, finally remembered something. Today I am reminded of my shortcomings, he said. He told Pharaoh about his time in prison. about a young Hebrew slave who had interpreted his dream and the baker's dream, and how everything happened exactly as the slave had predicted. Pharaoh didn't hesitate. Get him. Now. They rushed to the prison and found Joseph. For him, it was probably just another day in the cell he'd been in 4 years. But they pulled him out, gave him a razor, and told him to clean himself up. Pharaoh wanted to see him. Joseph shaved, changed into Egyptian clothes, and was brought into the throne room, standing before the man who held his life in his hands. Pharaoh looked at him. I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I've heard that you can. This was Joseph's moment. He could have taken the credit, tried to bargain for his freedom. But he didn't. Looking Pharaoh in the eye, he said, I cannot do it. But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires, not me. God. After 13 years of suffering, Joseph knew where his gift came from. So Pharaoh told him the dreams, the cows, the grain. Joseph listened, and then he knew. The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. He said, God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows and 7 good heads of grain meant 7 years of great abundance. The 7 gaunt cows and scorched heads of grain meant 7 years of famine would follow, so severe it would ravage the land. The dream was repeated, Joseph explained. Because the matter has been firmly decided by God. And God will do it soon. Then Joseph did something bold. He didn't just interpret the dream. He gave Pharaoh a plan. Let Pharaoh find a discerning and wise man and put him in charge. Appoint commissioners to collect 1/5 of the harvest during the good years and store it. This food will be a reserve for the famine, so that the country will not be ruined. It was a brilliant, practical plan that could save millions of lives. Pharaoh looked at his officials. Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? The room was silent. The answer was obvious. Pharaoh turned back to Joseph. Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. And right there, in that moment, everything changed. 13 years of slavery, false accusations, and imprisonment were about to make sense. Joseph's dream wasn't dead. It was just getting started. Pharaoh didn't waste a second. He pulled his own signet ring off his finger, the ring that held the very authority of Egypt, and slid it onto Joseph's. Just like that. A Hebrew slave who walked into the throne room in borrowed clothes was now wearing the symbol of absolute power. Then came the royal robes. Fine linen. The kind of fabric Joseph probably hadn't felt since his father gave him that special coat all those years ago. A heavy gold chain was placed around his neck. And then Pharaoh said something that must have made Joseph's head spin. I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt. Let that sink in. Without Joseph's permission, nothing moved in Egypt. Not the armies, not the grain trade, not the people. Pharaoh had just made a 30-year-old former slave the second most powerful man in the known world. They gave Joseph the second royal chariot, and as he rode through the streets, heralds ran ahead, shouting for people to bow down. The man who'd been in chains was now the one everyone knelt before. Joseph was 30 years old. It had been 13 years since his brothers threw him in that pit. 13 years of slavery, false accusations, prison, and waiting. 13 long years. Pharaoh also gave Joseph a wife, Asenath, the daughter of an Egyptian priest. And soon, they had 2 sons. He named the first one Manasseh, which means God has made me forget all my trouble in my father's household. Think about that name. After everything, Joseph could finally say the pain was beginning to fade. The second son he named Ephraim, which means God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Notice he didn't say in the land of my success. He said the land of my suffering. Joseph understood something profound. God had made him fruitful right there, in the middle of the worst years of his life. The fruit didn't come after the suffering ended, it grew because of it. Then, just as Joseph had predicted, the 7 years of abundance began. The harvests were insane. Grain was everywhere, more than anyone knew what to do with. But Joseph had a plan. He collected 1/5 of every harvest and stored it in cities across Egypt. They collected so much grain that they eventually stopped even trying to measure it. Was like the sow of the sea. beyond counting, and then, right on schedule. The famine hit, the abundance stopped, the crops failed, first in Egypt, then across all the surrounding lands. The earth dried up, and people grew desperate. Starvation was a very real threat. But Egypt had grain. Mountains of it. All because of Joseph's foresight. Soon, people started coming from everywhere to buy food. Caravans traveled for weeks just to reach Egypt, just for a chance at survival. One day, a group of 10 men arrived from Canaan. They were older now, withered by the sun and hardship. The famine had hit their home hard, and they heard Egypt had grain to sell, so they came. And they bowed before the powerful Egyptian official in charge of grain distribution. Pressing their faces to the ground, they had no idea they were bowing to their own brother. Those dreams Joseph had told them about 22 years ago, the very dreams they had mocked him for, the dreams that made them hate him enough to sell him into slavery was coming true. Right there, in front of them. And they were completely clueless. Joseph stood there in his royal robes, looking down at his brothers' bowed heads, and everything must have come rushing back. The pit, the chains, the years of wondering if he'd ever see his family again. He could have revealed himself right then and there. He could have forgiven them or condemned them or just ended the mystery. But he didn't. The story wasn't over. There was one brother missing, Benjamin, his only full brother, the other son of Rachel. And Joseph needed to know, had his brothers changed, or were they still the same ruthless men who'd sold him away all those years ago? So he decided to test them. And what was about to unfold would crack open 22 years of pain and reveal whether redemption was even possible. Thanks for watching. If you're finding this story as incredible as I am, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the dramatic conclusion. We'll see you in the next video. Joseph looked at his brothers, his face an unreadable mask of power. They had no idea who he was. To them, he was just some powerful, foreign Egyptian lord. He even spoke to them through an interpreter, though he understood every single Hebrew word they said. "You're spies," Joseph accused them, his voice sharp. "You've come to see where our land is weak." They panicked. "No, my lord. We're honest men, here only to buy food. We are all sons of one man, not spies." "Then where is this father you speak of? Where are the rest of you?" "We were 12 brothers," they explained, and you can almost hear the tremor in their voices. "The youngest is with our father, and one is no more. One is no more." That's how they described him. Gone. Erased. Joseph's expression didn't change, but inside, something twisted. Did they ever regret it? Or had they just buried the memory? "Prove you're not spies," Joseph demanded. "One of you will stay here in prison. The rest of you take grain to your starving families, but you must bring your youngest brother back to me. Only then will I know you're telling the truth." He threw them all in prison for 3 days, letting them stew in their fear. When he finally brought them out, he kept Simeon, tying him up right in front of them, and sent the others home. As they were leaving, Joseph overheard them talking. "This is our punishment for what we did to Joseph," one said. "We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we wouldn't listen. That's why this is happening." Reuben, the oldest, added, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? Now we have to answer for his blood." They thought it was divine justice. Joseph had to turn away, hiding the tears that streamed down his face. The famine raged on. And eventually, they returned. This time, they brought Benjamin. When Joseph saw his younger brother, the little boy he remembered, now a grown man, he almost lost his composure. He had to rush to his private room to weep where no one could see him. But the test wasn't over. After a generous feast, Joseph did something calculated. He had his personal silver cup planted in Benjamin's sack of grain. Then, he sent his steward to chase them down. "Why have you repaid good with evil?" the steward demanded. "You've stolen my master's cup." They were horrified. "If any one of us has it, let him die, and the rest of us will become your slaves." The steward searched their sacks, one by one, and when he opened Benjamin's, there it was, the cup. They tore their clothes in grief, loaded their donkeys, and returned to the city, throwing themselves on the ground before Joseph. "What have you done?" Joseph asked. And then Judah, the very same Judah who suggested selling Joseph all those years ago, stepped forward. "What can we say? God has uncovered our guilt. We are now my Lord's slaves, all of us." "No," Joseph said. "Only the man who had the cup will be my slave. The rest of you can go home in peace." This was the final test. Would they abandon Benjamin just as they had abandoned Joseph? Judah moved closer and began a speech that shattered Joseph's heart. "My lord, please listen. Our father is old, and this boy is the son of his old age. His brother is dead, and he's the only one left of his mother's sons. Our father loves him. If we go back without the boy, he will die. His life is bound up with the boy's life." Judah's voice broke. "So please, let me stay here as your slave instead of the boy. Let him go home with his brothers. I cannot bear to see the misery that would destroy my father." Joseph couldn't hold back anymore. These were not the same men. Judah was offering his own life to save Benjamin, to spare their father more pain. They had changed. "Have everyone leave." Joseph shouted. The room cleared. It was just him and his brothers. And then Joseph wept, loud, racking sobs that echoed through the palace. Through his tears, he finally spoke the words that would change everything. "I am Joseph." The brothers froze, terrified. "Is my father still alive?" They couldn't speak. If this was Joseph, they were dead men, seeing their fear. Joseph's voice softened. "Come close to me." They inched forward, trembling. "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt." 22 years of pain, secrets, and shame, all collapsing in that one single moment. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Come close to me. Imagine hearing those words from someone you betrayed 20 years ago. Joseph's brothers inched forward, their hearts pounding. This powerful Egyptian ruler, the man who held their lives in his hands, then says, "I am Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into Egypt." Silence. The weight of those words must have been crushing. The memory of the pit, their brother's screams, the 20 pieces of silver, it all comes rushing back. But then, Joseph shatters their expectations. "Don't be distressed," he says. "Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here." What? How could he not be furious? They had ruined his life, left him for dead. And he was comforting them. Here's the twist, the key that unlocks the entire story. Joseph tells them, "Because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. It was not you who sent me here, but God." Think about that for a second. Joseph doesn't pretend what they did was okay. He doesn't minimize the pain. But he sees a bigger picture, a divine blueprint that was invisible while he was living through the betrayal, the slavery, and the years in prison. He could see that every single horrible event had a purpose. It was all a setup. Joseph explains that the famine they're experiencing will last for 5 more years. "God sent me ahead of you," he repeats, "to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance." The pit, the prison, Potiphar's wife, every setback was a stepping stone. Each moment of suffering positioned him to be in this exact place, at this exact time, with the authority to save millions of people, including the very family that cast him out. So then, he declares, "It was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household and ruler of all Egypt." He then gives them a mission: go get their father, Jacob, and bring the entire family to Egypt where he can provide for them. He embraces his youngest brother, Benjamin, and they both weep. Then he embraces all his brothers. And after the tears, for the first time in over 2 decades, they truly talk. When the brothers return to Canaan and tell their father, Joseph is alive. He's the ruler of all Egypt. Jacob is stunned. He can't believe it. But when he sees the carts Joseph sent, the reality sinks in. "I'm convinced," he says. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." The reunion between father and son is one of the most moving moments imaginable. Jacob, holding the son he thought was dead, says, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." The entire family, 70 people, settles in Egypt, their fractured lives being pieced back together, sustained by the grace of the one they tried to destroy. Years pass, and Jacob dies. The brothers' old fear returns. What if Joseph was just waiting for our father to be gone? They whisper. What if now he'll finally get his revenge? Terrified, they send a message, begging for forgiveness. When Joseph receives it, he weeps. His brothers throw themselves at his feet, saying, "We are your slaves." But Joseph lifts them up. "Don't be afraid," he says. "Am I in the place of God?" And then he delivers the most powerful line in the entire story. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." You intended it for harm, but God intended it for good. That single sentence is the heart of it all. It's God's unbelievable plan. What looked like a dead end was a new beginning. What felt like total abandonment was divine positioning. The path of injustice led to a justice far greater than anyone could have imagined. Because Joseph chose to see God's hand in his suffering, forgiveness became possible. Redemption became real, and a family that should have been shattered by betrayal was saved, not in spite of the pain, but through it. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more. So, why does the story of Joseph, this ancient figure from thousands of years ago, matter to you? It matters because it's not just history, it's a blueprint. It's a guide for how God can work in your life, especially when it feels like everything is falling apart. Maybe you feel like you're in a pit right now. Not a literal one, of course, but you know what I mean. A pit of betrayal, where someone you trusted turned on you. Your dreams have been torn away, and you're left in the dark, wondering if anyone even sees you. I'm here to tell you, he does. Or maybe you're in what feels like Potiphar's house. Things were finally starting to look up. You were doing all the right things, choosing integrity over convenience, and then suddenly, it all backfired. You got punished for your honesty, and now you're left wondering why being faithful seems to only bring more pain. Don't stop, keep going. Perhaps you feel like you're in prison, forgotten. You've been waiting for a breakthrough for so long that you're starting to believe this. Waiting is your final destination. It feels like this is just your life now. You've helped people who promised they'd remember you, who swore they'd have your back, but they forgot you the moment they walked out the door. Don't you dare give up. Here is the powerful lesson from Joseph's life. The detours you face are not derailments. They are part of the divine design. What people intend for harm, God has the power to transform into something so beautiful it will literally take your breath away. Think about it. The betrayal from his brothers. It was the very act that positioned Joseph to eventually save entire nations from famine. The lies from Potiphar's wife, they landed him in the exact prison where he needed to be to meet Pharaoh's cupbearer, and the cupbearer forgetting him. That delay meant Joseph's big moment arrived at precisely the right time. When the crisis was at its peak, and only he held the solution, your dreams might be taking longer to unfold than you ever expected. Way longer. 13 years passed between the pit and the palace for Joseph. That's a long time to wait. 13 years of being faithful when it looked like faithfulness was getting him absolutely nowhere. But through it all, his dreams weren't dead. God doesn't waste your waiting. He doesn't waste your suffering. He certainly doesn't waste your faithfulness, especially when it costs you everything. So, what are you enduring right now? What pit are you sitting in? What prison cell feels like it's become your permanent address? I want you to hold on. The same God who was with Joseph in that pit, who was with him in Potiphar's house, who was with him in the prison, and who ultimately raised him up in Pharaoh's palace, that same God is with you. Right now. In the middle of your mess. In your waiting. In your feeling of this doesn't make any sense and I can't see how this could ever work out. He is writing a story that you can't see yet. Your story isn't over. Sometimes, God is setting you up for something far bigger than you could ever dream for yourself. Sometimes, the very delays you're experiencing are positioning you perfectly for the miracle that's on its way. Sometimes, the pit is the only path to the palace, and one day, maybe not today, Maybe not tomorrow, but one day you will look back and see it all clearly. You'll see how every betrayal, every setback, every single moment you thought God had forgotten you was actually Him setting the stage for something unbelievable. So keep going, keep being faithful, keep trusting. Even when trusting feels foolish, because your story isn't over, and the God who turned Joseph's nightmare into a nation-saving miracle, He is not done with you either. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this.